So yeah, each version of Windows does it a little differently, but for the most part, it's the same. So each user has to have a user account, even if that's a shared user account for many people, like a kiosk. Probably just have a default user. And there's actually a database on Windows for each user that has an encrypted list of all of the usernames and passwords that can easily be viewed in its encrypted form and easily cracked if you're practicing that sort of thing on your own machine. So each record on the local machine is just called a local user account. Everyone knows what that looks like. So there's some stuff like that that's, we already know, which is why this will go by quickly. So home editions use a more basic tool than what the professional, enterprise, and ultimate editions do. So they include more advanced utility inside professional and above. So passwords are the first measure that you can have right in front of antivirus and firewalls, because if you didn't have a password, if someone gets in, they could do anything. It's actually kind of scary. So password length should be at least 8 characters and include letters, numbers, and punctuation such as $signs, percentage. The ones I know or the ones that I use? The one that I use to log in is 16 characters. My bank account, I have in a password manager, that one's 64 characters long, and that's encrypted in its software, and then it has a key file that's also backed up. I don't actually have it on the same USB drive or on my laptop. It's actually up in the cloud on my Dropbox account. And that file is encrypted using that password as well. So you have to get the file and know the password and have the password manager and the password file. So there's always a way to beat it, but makes it more difficult. And then this is just showing the password hint. So a group is a collection of accounts that share the same capabilities and permissions. Basically what they are capable of achieving on a higher level than a standard user, or able to access. Windows XP provides built-in groups that can't be deleted, such as administrators, power users, everyone guess. So I'll just back up. Administrators is anyone who has full administrative privileges. These are all local groups that are built into Windows, not domain groups. Power users are a level below administrators, and they can do almost everything except install new devices and access other files unless they were given access to those. Users, called limited users, or also standard users, but in XP they're called limited. Vista and 7 they're called standard. They basically can't do anything unless you specifically let them do it. Everyone is what it sounds like. It's encompassing everyone is within that, except for guest. Guest is a separate entity in itself. So XP Home Edition only allows you to use admins, users, and guests. And then of course in the professional editions you can use a lot more. And there's even more groups available than those for when you have professional, but they don't dab on it too much because it's not something you'll need to know for everyday troubleshooting. Something you might need once you get an IT job, but not for helping your neighbor out or whatever. So this is like the advanced way of getting to it, and you can get to it through computer management or using the MMC console. Both ways work. Windows XP provides the Windows account applet. Applet's just a fancy way of saying the program that opens when you go into settings in the control panel. That's all it means. User accounts. Oh, I know what they mean by this. In XP, when you're an administrator, you can manage all the users. When you're a limited user, you don't have that privilege, so you're only able to see your own user and do basic low-level things with it, such as change your password, change your picture. I think you can change the name of your user as well, but unless you're an administrator, you can't do anything really beyond that with users. So to create a user account, you have to name the account and make sure you define it as administrator or limited. Technically, it doesn't need a password, but technically speaking, every account needs a password, even if that password is blank. So the password is stored as blank. So they might ask you, true or false, does every user account need a password? The answer would be yes, because technically blank is considered a password. So yeah, this is just kind of what it looks like if you're an admin. Maybe they'll show it. Yeah, and then one of the steps, picking if it's an administrator or limited. So that's two ways you can log in. There's like a friendly page where it shows all the available users, and then there's a classic logon screen where you have to actually physically enter in the name of your user and your password. Classic is more secure because then you're not able to see all the users and brute force it. If you do classic, then the only thing you can see is the last user that logged on. So at most, instead of whoever's attacking brute forcing every account, they only know one of the accounts. So you significantly reduce the chance of them getting in to begin with. And that's just the screen to choose. Fast user switching is the same as Windows 7 switch user. All it is switching between users without logging off. So it leaves them logged in and then it locks it after you hit change user. And it's the same thing, it's just a different name. I generally recommend logging off if you're changing users because what's the point of having a user logged in that's using resources if you're not even using it? And then that's just what it classic looks like. Searching users. So 3 accounts are created: guest administrator and whatever account you create. And the administrator has a password created by Windows that's unknown to the actual administrator of the PC. It's automatically disabled along with guest. You can change it later, however, it's not recommended to use it. Okay. User accounts and family safety is an applet that got introduced in Vista, and that was if you had a computer that was on a work group and not on a domain. And the idea behind that was like if you had a home PC and you had a PC that you shared with your kids or whatever, it was sort of like the equivalent of Windows 7 parental controls. And then, regular user accounts for every other version. And there it is. And then here's how it's different. So you can see family safety, no family safety. And then it's the same thing as XP. If you're an administrator, it looks like this because you can click on Manage User Accounts. If you're not an administrator, you don't see that. You only see your own user. So it looks kind of like that when you're an administrator. I think the other one was a limited user. You can kind of see the difference of how many options you have. So parental controls allows the administrator to control other accounts, such as blocking applications, blocking the time that the computer can be accessed, and how much time per day can be used. So if you don't do time restrictions, you could do like, I don't know, maybe 2 hours a day or whatever. If it's a PC that's strictly used for games, you could do that. And for the most part, it's done by category, but if you have specific programs you don't want them accessing, you can do it like that as well by selecting the last option, which is allow and block specific programs. There are ways to get around it. Trust me, I know. It is irritating though. Okay. So this is the same thing, Windows 7, except it just says standard user instead of limited user. It just looks and feels a little different. That's all it is. So this is how you can get into local users and groups, and that adds a lot of features to be able to have more granular control over users in the initial process. Whereas if you create them in the control panel, you have to go into these settings later, so you can get some of the setup options out of the way right away. And it feels a lot like the way you do user management server side when you're on like a domain, which is kind of nice. That's kind of what it looks like. Pretty much the same thing as what Active Directory users and computers looks like, but less advanced because it's local. So users can actually be members of multiple groups. Like if you're an administrator, but you're also in the IT department, so there might be drive mappings in the IT group that you don't want everyone who's an administrator getting to, but you can do it that way. So if you have HR who has the drive mapping, they would be a part of that group, and so on. And then when you're in selecting the users for it, you can go in this box, you type in their name, and then you click check names, and it'll automatically find the user. So there's multiple entries with the same keyword that you typed in. It'll pop up and it'll ask you which one you want to pick. Like that. And then the member of tab just tells you what groups that particular user is a part of. If you click on this same area on a group, you'll see member of, and you'll see members. So it'll show you who is in the group and if the group is part of a different group. So you can actually do a lot of hierarchical management that way. Okay. So part of NTFS is that they added security when it was implemented from what the original FAT32 was. So that's why it's kind of brought up here. And without further ado, so you can go into properties and security tab to view the current security permissions. There is basic and advanced security. So if you do basic, you can do the same permissions as advanced. However, you miss out on a lot of options, but a lot of times you don't need advanced options, so it's just easier to go through basic. Alright. So this is important. Administrators do not automatically have complete control because it's important to note that the owner of the file automatically has master control over whatever the permissions are for anyone else. That person will always have full control over that file until either ownership is changed or actually that's pretty much the only exception. And there's a button called Take Control, which is on the owner tab when you're in properties. So when you create a file, you're automatically owner, which would be highly irritating if you weren't, because then you don't have to take ownership every time you created a file in order to edit it. And if you're an administrator of that system or a domain admin, you can take ownership of any file. And then when you're in permissions, you can change who can access those files or folders and how much they can access. And this is just what it looks like. If you click here, you get simple basic permissions. If you go down to advanced down here, you see much more thorough permissions. Let you do a lot more in-depth configuration. You have to keep track of what you're doing though, because what will happen is you'll have people that are a part of multiple groups, and if you change the group that applies to all of the groups below it, so like authenticated users is basically the equivalent of everyone in a domain. If you change the permissions on authenticated users to read, administrators and users will only have read. Even though administrators can change the privileges back, it'll get inherited unless you select specifically for it not to be inherited. And there's a checkbox in advanced for that. The basic configuration does not have that. As the name suggests, folder permissions go to folders and file permissions go to files. So full control is to be able to do anything with the file, except if. So even if you have full control, it doesn't mean you can take ownership. So if you're a limited user and you have full control, you can't take ownership. If you're an administrator with anything, you can take ownership. And if you're an owner, you can change the owner to anyone else. But if you're limited, regardless of your permissions, you can't change owners. This folder contents, pretty straightforward. Can you see the files or folders? You add them. Read just equals to, can you read the files in the folder? And then write is just being able to write to files and create new files and folders. So see, all this stuff makes it really complicated, but this is part of the reason why I like Linux more in this respect. There's only 3 permissions that you need to know: read, write, and execute. It really can't be easier. But then, of course, you have to know the permission numbers when you're applying them, which are they're all online, so you don't need to memorize them. But, well, yeah, but you're not always going to have GUI, And with Linux, it's nice to have that console experience because it's faster once you get used to it, and it's more advanced as well. So you can avoid a lot of the troubles that GUI gives you. You get the overhead, things get laggy. Okay, like I said, permissions are inherited by default. I just went over that. Okay. So permissions are retained, except if it's put into a folder where permission inheritance is enabled to child folders. No. So if you have a file where it says, okay, I want this folder to be read only, and everything below it be read-write. So you can't delete the folder, but you can delete folders underneath it. If you take a folder that is read, write, execute, or full control, and you put it into that folder where all those folders in there are read, write, that folder will become read, write. So you have to kind of keep in mind when you're placing a folder in a different place, is this folder going to be made available to other people? So especially if you go from NTFS to FAT32, as soon as you move any folders or files from NTFS to FAT, all permissions get dropped because they don't support permissions. So it literally strips all the security that you just did off of it. So someone can copy files, strip of permissions, and give it to anyone else, and they can get to it. So that's why some companies are very strict about USB drives, like banks, confidential information, financial institutions, law offices. And then this is just more permissions in the advanced settings tab. Okay, we're a third of the way there. Woo! I don't really need to explain that. You know what copy and move does. This is important because not everyone does this. Administrators should never ever know anyone else's passwords except for their own, because if anything happens and it shows that that user was responsible in the logs and you know their password, you're potentially going to be blamed for that issue occurring, even though it's their account. And it's a really critical position to be in, especially if you weren't at fault. And a lot of end users are horrible about taking responsibility for their mistakes. So just do yourself a favor. This is just kind of saying lock down your documents folder, encryption. You can do basic configuration using the encryption text checkbox. It's not that great. The built-in isn't. Windows 7 does a better job because they have BitLocker now, which is a better encryption method. You can actually have BitLocker keys where the key can decrypt the files, which is pretty darn cool. And this is just an XP, how you make the folder public for sharing. And then once you check that, it makes a box available right there for you to change who can access it. And then this is just sharing over the network. I'm not going to go over that. It's a little redundant. So there's these public folders, and they're folders created on XP and above, and every user has access to them. So if you put files in there, then you can share files between users. They're never really utilized, because if you're sharing files, you're usually doing it over the network, or if you're on the same PC, you probably just have a USB drive to begin with. And they're so common now, no one uses it. Home groups are nice at home. So you can have multiple machines join into the home group, and it'll basically make a share on your machines, and you can access that share from any PC in your local LAN. It's actually kind of nice for a small home area, but it's not good for anything larger. Computer management administrative tool. So when you're in here, all of those, these in the middle, are just the shares that are on that local machine. And some of those are built in created by default, like admin $C $, those are on by default. You can disable those manually or through group policy. Both methods are valid. So yeah, same thing. If it's not C, then it's just whatever the letter is. And they're always recreated at reboot. It's just one of the weird things that Windows does. So they're hidden by default, and that's all the $sign does, is it hides the share. Doesn't make it go away. It just makes it where when you're searching the network feature, you don't see it being broadcasted. So you have to know where the share is to get to it. And then encryption is just scrambling data so that only the account that encrypted it can read it. And this is really nice in the domain environment because then you have each user has their personal files and only they can access them. It's also kind of irritating if you realize after you delete someone's user that you needed their files, because now you can never have them. Because if you recreate the user, it's not truly the same user. There's a unique ID that's assigned to each user, and when that user creates a file, it's unique and tied to that account. If you delete it, create it with the same name, it's a unique ID that's created with that new user. Alright. Yeah, so you go into advanced, and then there's the checkbox to encrypt the data. And the data will turn a blue color to symbolize that it's encrypted versus the normal black. And then you can just use BitLocker as well to encrypt your files on your USB drive or your hard drive. And that's just in your control panel. UAC. This is a great feature and should definitely be utilized. So when it first came out, everyone hated it because it's really annoying. Pops up every single time you need access to something that can modify the system. However, it was quickly realized the value of the product because prevents you from running things that you shouldn't run. Like if you get a Trojan virus that needs admin privileges to run, your program will pop up and say, hey, are you sure you want to run this? And then if you're not an administrator, you would have to enter in a user account credentials that does have administrative privileges. So it's a good first security measure for users to keep them from running things they're not supposed to. I always recommend users creating an administrator account but not logging in as it. Create 2 accounts, create an administrator account, and create a standard account for yourself. So if you get infected on your user account, it can't get very far. You can infect your files in your local user. You can't modify critical Windows files. And the only way it would be able to damage those files is if they knew your administrator account's password to Elevate. So you have a line of security there, which is good. Hopefully at that point your antivirus is able to stop them before they can bypass UAC. Once again, there are ways to bypass it, and this is just what UAC looks like on a Mac. They don't refer to it as that. It's just privilege elevation, but same principle. So administrative privileges, they're just kind of showing how dangerous it can be to give administrative privileges to the wrong people, because these are System32 files, which are low-level Windows programs. So things like Command Prompt, Notepad, registry, everything that makes it what it is contained within there. Most of it anyway. I kind of set everything that pertains to. Okay. Yeah, so that's why I said just if you're a standard account, you have to enter admin privileges to get any further. Looks like I got ahead of myself. So regardless of what user level you're at, UAC pops up. If you're a standard user, it asks you for admin privileges. If you're an administrator, it still asks you if you want to run it, but you don't need to enter credentials. So this is what it looks like if you're a standard user. And then that's a administrator prompt. So 4 types of UAC prompts. Block program. So if there's a policy in place that specifically blocks that program that was attempted to run, it will never run regardless of your privileges on that PC until the policy is changed. Unverified, it's just an unknown third-party program. Basically, most programs that are downloaded from the internet that are developed by third-party companies. Like really, really new programs that haven't been verified by Microsoft yet. Then there's verified, which are most programs. And then published by Vista is just programs developed by Microsoft themselves. And then that's just an example of program being blocked, unverified, verified, and then just published by Vista. So it puts the shield icon over the icons to symbolize that it requires administrative privileges to be run. You can turn it off, but I would not. It's a user account control. There's an option to turn it off in Vista and XP. You can do it in MS-config as well, but it's a little slower, so you have some extra hoops to jump through to get there. So yeah, just an example of it showing you ahead of time that you'll need admin privileges. And then it's right down here, and it's relatively the same in Vista and 7. And then this is what it looks like in MS-config. So Windows Vista was pretty annoying. It really got in the way. Windows 7 is modified where you can actually change how much UAC gets in the way. So the default is that it dims the screen and it pops up the box. A level below that, and as you lower this is less and less recommended. A level below that is that it still makes the noise when the prompt pops up, however it doesn't dim the screen, and it doesn't force you to click on that box to continue using Windows. So you could literally ignore it and nothing would happen other than the box continuing to sit there. And then there's the noise is completely disabled and the box opens behind all of your programs. So you won't see anything, you'll just see your program not opening. I usually turn off the dimming. It's kind of obnoxious. But the in-your-face dimming is kind of helpful if you have a less experienced user. It kind of gets their attention. Yeah, so this is what I just said. So always notify, so it pops up, it dims the screen. Don't notify me. And then never notify is turning it completely off. So these two here are just the in-between, don't dim, but still pop up, and then, show behind, but don't make the noise. So that's where that's at. And this is just how it works right here. So down at this level is where it doesn't dim, and then it just goes down from there. Save deal. And then you can just see the dark outline around it. Same thing, just dark.
Kids log in as a single user. It's got the shield by the icon. Requires validation and continues to start. Now, I had been successful previously trying to use a scheduled task to start that with validation, but this particular program doesn't work. You wondering if it is doing?
You mean starting the program as administrator without being prompted on his account?
Without having to put in
Credentials. No, not really. What program is it?
It's a capture utility program.
Oh, okay. There's one called Overrule. That's a good one. One I use as well as an alternative to that is called Open Broadcaster software. That one's free. And there's one called Camtasia. That one's pretty popular. I don't know. There's a lot of them. I don't know. You can try one of those. And they don't require elevation. But I don't know a way to bypass it. There is probably a way. I can't think of it off the top of my head. It's been a while since I needed to do that. So, these are various tasks you should run periodically to keep your Windows happy and clean. So, patching the OS, making sure that you run Windows Update every once in a while. Usually it's best to set it where it just automatically installs updates, even especially at a time when you're likely to be using it, because if you set it to 3 a.m., your computer's probably off. You're probably not using it, so it won't run. So if you're going to set it to 3 a.m., then you should at least run it manually every once in a while. Clearing out old files. Those are just personal files is what it means. So in your documents folder on your desktop, so on. Pruning the registry, don't do this manually. There's a nice program known as CCleaner that will do it automatically. The Pro Edition will do live monitoring, but the free version you have to run manually. And then running built-in utilities such as air checking, disk defragmenter. And another one is just cleaning. That one's nice. And then making sure that you have your virus definitions up to date.
Is that registry cleaning or data cleaning anymore? I mean, when they're back in.
I do. I mean, whenever I uninstall something, I'll run it. Developers are getting better about designing their programs where they actually remove everything, but there's still programmers out there that are just really lazy, and then their programs leave a lot of things behind, which is what it is cleaning, is the laziness of the programmers. So, yes, I'll say yes. So yeah, I mean, you know what Windows Update is. So you can either go through all programs Windows Update. Internet Explorer is basically an XP thing now, because you don't need to, it's built in. So you have 4 levels. Do it automatically, download and install. Download but not install, so it asks you after it is downloaded if you want to install. Notify. So that's literally, it checks for new updates, but it won't download them and it won't install any automatically. Then turn off, it won't check, it won't ask you. Highly unrecommended. If you have like a virtual machine, you're trying out Windows, trying out some software you don't want to install on your PC, you don't really want Windows updates running because you don't really care about security on your virtual machine, and frankly it's kind of annoying, so you should turn that off. Service packs, it's just a lot of updates crammed into one update, and every Windows OS releases service packs at one point or another, at least with XP and above. And then the process of actually updating Windows is known as patch management. So you can remove service packs through control panel, or you can use sp unin st.exe. It's easiest just to go through control panel. Yeah, so by Puriform, that's what I was just talking about. Okay. So scheduled tasks, you can just have something that runs periodically. Task scheduler, which is the replacement for the scheduled maintenance. So the trigger is what you want to happen that makes this task run. So I think it's like a time. You could do it at log on, you could do it at log off, when the computer turns on. Some of them actions, it's just what you want to happen. And conditions is anything that you want to happen before or after the program runs, or with the program. So maybe the program is command prompt and you want it to run a ping. You could use a condition for ping. So you can automate disk defragmentation. I think Pistons 7 do that in the background automatically. And then you're checking, you can just use check disk. That's another thing I don't really bother with unless something is wrong. So in the XP days, you would go in this config to configure startup settings. So most of the time when you went in, it was to disable a program that you didn't want to start every time you booted up. You know, like Java Updater or Adobe Updater. It was like, hey, do you want to update Java? No, I don't. Go away. So you can turn it off there. Now you can go into Task Manager, and inside there it will have services and startup, and you can disable programs in there, and it'll even tell you how intensive that process is on your startup time. So it has like 3 levels. It's like low, medium, high, and I think there's very high in there somewhere. So 5 general areas for improvement. removing software will always optimize Windows. I always recommend doing a CClean or registry clean after removing software because there's generally stuff left over. Alternatively, you can use a program known as Revo and install it that will look for those registry remnants right after it uninstalls, which is kind of cool. So in the program, you select it, click uninstall, and then before it uninstalls it, it searches and it looks at all the files that are there, all the registry entries. After it uninstalls, it compares to what was there when it was installed, and then it just shows you, hey, this is what's left over, and you have it remove all of them automatically. It does the same thing with the physical files that were there, so it's very thorough. Free program as well. Then you can see in-depth information about your PC through MS Info 32. That's kind of a handy program just to use some additional information about your PC. Another thing you can do is LARC Advisor, which does this, and license keys as well. So it's kind of outdated. Now most programs you just download and actually get them on a disk anymore. But you can still see disks that have auto run on them. Auto run is kind of phased out since 7. You didn't really see it so much because it was really insecure. So, really horrible feature. It's kind of nice for like if you put an SD card in from your camera or something and you're importing photos, but aside from that, it's really bad. So you can install and remove critical Windows components through here. So you could remove Internet Explorer. However, in XP, you needed Internet Explorer to do Windows updates. That's how you got to the page. They didn't have it built in. So if you uninstalled it, you couldn't do Windows updates. Just really, really horrible design. And then you could do things like games, TCP/IP, fax. There was a lot more too. Yeah, here said it looks like it's 7. And you can tell there's a lot more because of this purple bar that's available. Just talked about that. Same thing. They have driver updates in Windows updates as well. A lot of times, new devices will actually have Microsoft verified drivers that will install when you install the device itself. You might not even have to go to the manufacturer's site. AMD's been pretty good about that. They have their drivers certified by Microsoft, and when you insert their devices, it'll actually download the official driver through Windows Update. It's kind of awesome. So you don't have to go to their site and find the right one. So, signed drivers are just drivers that have been tested by Microsoft to function with the OS. So last week we kind of brushed on this. Same thing. If it hasn't been verified, you'll see a screen like this. Doesn't mean it doesn't work, it just means it hasn't been verified. A lot of times the reason it hasn't been verified is because companies have to actually pay Microsoft to test them. If they don't want to pay them, then they don't get it tested, and then you get the scary screen. So if the driver breaks it, whatever it is, you can roll back. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but if it worked before you tried to update the driver, then it should work when you roll it back. Sometimes Windows will not automatically detect a device. If that happens, you have to go into Add Hardware Wizard, which will help you to find that device and install the drivers for it. This is used a lot more in XP. However, I haven't used this since then because I go straight to the device manager, and usually it's pretty obvious which device isn't working, because it'll have, a weird icon that's different from every other device there. So I really never use this. It's just, I feel like I don't have enough control over the process. Oops. So did I actually miss anything? Not really. Okay. Alright, here's something. Notice there's a lot of visual features, 7 and Vista and XP. And they're in different places in each OS, but basically you can, if you're having performance issues, you can say, I want Windows to choose what's best, or choose what makes it look the best, or choose what makes it perform the best. So generally just letting it choose whatever does well enough. But if you have something that's really limited, you might need to select one of the other ones. This is pretty rare, but yeah, I'm just going to skip it because it's rare. I'm going to go past that. Resource tracking, okay. So if you're having problems with your machine being slow, you can use resources, and you can also use Task Manager to track down which programs or processes are slowing down the machine. So performance, Task Manager, and resources as well. So performance and reliability are some tools you can use to track that down. Generally, it's pretty obvious. You usually know what uses up the most amount of power in your machine. If you're running virtual machines, or if you have Chrome going, so much RAM is being used up by Chrome, it's ridiculous. But if you have enough RAM, it doesn't matter. So a keyboard command to get Task Manager up is Control-Shift-Escape, which is nice because then you don't have to do Control-Delete, go in the menu, and then select Task Manager. It's really valuable to know these key commands, especially if your mouse stops working. I used to know a guy who could navigate Windows faster using his keyboard than with his mouse. He stopped using his mouse, literally, because he could navigate so quickly and so efficiently, he didn't need it. So when he was in the office, he didn't use his mouse. He was literally just key commands for everything. Just really impressive. Administrative tools, this is universal between Windows versions. You have all of your administrative, pretty much what it sounds like, administrative tools thrown in a folder, and all this folder is a it's comprised of shortcuts to those tools. So it's one central place to get to those. It doesn't include all of them, but it has most of them. So you have the system monitor snapping, which you can track network throughput, and you can also view real-time data about memory, disk, processor, network, and other activities in many forms. The graph is the most useful because you don't really need to know how much RAM it's exactly using. It doesn't really matter. You just need to know what's taking up the most resources. So a graph, which is one of the default things that shows up, will show you that. Performance logs and alerts collect performance data from local or remote computers. And you can also configure it to save to a log. So if you can't catch a problem occurring, you can't replicate it, but you know it happens every single day at random times, you can set up triggers with logs to go off whenever that thing happens, and then it'll save to that file and you can view the log later. So this is what it looks like in XP. So all these lines down here, which you can customize, show up on the graph above, and the amount of resources it used, or in this case, pages per second, processor time, and average disk queue length. And you can also do these, you can monitor remote PCs through this as well, but you have to enable remote monitoring, remote connections, I should say. Do that later. So just so they were really big about gadgets, and they were pretty cool. You can still do them in 7, but I don't think they're as popular with most people anymore, because honestly they just kind of slowed down your machine. But they were kind of cool for a little while. And you could download new ones if you didn't like the ones that were built in. So that was kind of cool, because they just look kind of fun and they give you a little additional information. Performance monitor is something I'll go in every once in a while when I don't know what's going on with my programs or resources, where it's all going. This is like a really hardcore beefed up task manager. So you can export this to reports as well, which is nice. And you can get to this a ton of different ways as well. So reliability monitor is kind of what I just said. Describes stability in reports, crash dates. And you, once again, you can set up alerts to go off whenever something fails. So if Chrome crashes, create a log of what happened or whatever. Data collector sets. So that's just defining presets as to when this occurs. This is how detailed I want the log, and this is how far before and after that event I want included in the log. So you can do a ton of stuff like that. Because if you're looking for a problem, you're sifting through logs, it's tiring because it's a lot of redundant work, and you have to try to sift through all the unnecessary information, and it's a giant pain in the butt. So, yeah, you can tell that this is older. I forgot to update it. Windows 2000. So having a backup utility, a repair disk, emergency repair disk still exists with Vista 7, and I think they have one for XP as well, where you can reset your password by booting up the CD. But that's computer dependent, and I think it might even be user dependent. If it's on a domain, though, you can't use those disks because the password is actually stored on the server, even though there is a cached copy of that user on your PC. So Backup and Restore Center, you could create a it's basically like a snapshot in time of the state of your machine. A lot of times what you can do, what I recommend, is creating a backup point right after you install, and then in case you install a program and the program breaks it, you can restore to that snapshot either from the install disk, or you can do it within Windows if it doesn't break it to the point where you can't log in. And then these are just some tools that are pretty similar to that Windows Vista Backup and Restore Center. System Restore is kind of the, it's very, very similar. Recovery Console is more command line level recovery, and that's universal to Vista and 7 as well. They just call them different names, which is annoying. I wish they would keep naming standard between versions. So, I don't really need to explain the top, but you should always verify your backup. Easiest way to do this is to take a machine of the exact same specifications and restore your backup onto that machine. If it boots up in the state that you backed it up in, then you know that your backup is good. You obviously don't want to back up or restore it to the same system you backed up because you don't know if the backup is good. Enterprise backup solutions can sometimes have features built in where you can restore to a clone of that virtual machine that you backed up. So you can actually leave the current production server running and restore to an exact copy of that server the way it was when that backup occurred. So if that server starts acting up, you can restore it to that copy, and as soon as the copy comes up, you shut down the current production and it immediately switches over. No one ever knows that it happened. That's kind of cool. That was a Unitrends thing that we had implemented at a company I was at. That was actually really nice. It was slick. Automated system recovery. That's on the Windows XP disk. So you can actually run that when it asks for, press this key to, install array drivers, or I think it's F3 is what it asks for to go into ASR. Something like that. I don't know. It usually pops up if you miss it. When it pops up, if it goes away, it's too late. You have to restart the disk and do it again. You're like sitting there waiting for it. You're like, and then it seems like eternity. It came so fast the first time, and then this time you're like, is it going to come up this time? And then as soon as you thought it wasn't going to come up, there it is. This is outdated. So the goal of a good backup is to have the data ready in case of any type of failure, whether it's a crash, file loss, literally anything. You don't need to do a full backup every night. It would take up a massive amount of space, and it's way too time consuming. At one of the companies I worked at, same company, a full backup would take a day and a half. It's a lot of data. I mean, we had like 13 servers, so a full backup of every server would take way too long, especially the file servers. So we would do differential backups. So full backups, also known as normal backups, or just everything is being backed up. Incremental backup is backing up the changes since the last backup. So if it's since the full, it's changes since the full. If it's changes, let's say you have 3 backups, a full, an incremental, and an incremental. So the second incremental is actually the changes since that first incremental, not since the full. differential is different. What you do is differential backs up the changes since the full. It completely ignores the previous differential backups. So let's say I have 3 files, and I have a differential backup the next day, and 2 of those files have changed. That differential backup will back up those 2 files. Let's say next day rolls around, all 3 files are changed, or even those 2 files are changed again. The next differential backup will back up those 2 files again, or those 3 files total. So you use up a little more space with differential. However, you have a little more security because you have full copies of the changed files between backups. So with incremental, you have 1 copy of the changed files since the last backup. So you have a little more security, but in order, it's this much space is the most. This is the second most, and then this is the third most space used for backups. But obviously, as you go down into space used, you get less and less security for restores in case your backup gets corrupt. So every single backup starts with a full, because you have to base your backup off of something. Incrementals are nice because they're very fast, because generally your changes since the last update are relatively minor, even in an enterprise environment. So this chart kind of shows how it works, in case I didn't explain it well enough. Okay. In case you were interested in backing up to tape from Windows 7, you can't. But you'd be surprised. Enterprise still uses tape because tape is cheap. Tape is slow, but tape is cheap. And a lot of times you have years and years and years of tapes archived somewhere off-site, usually by policy of the company. And it's expensive to say, okay, I can either keep buying tapes, and every single week I send those tapes off and bring back old tapes and rewrite over them. Or I can send out, $100 hard drives every single week. It's like a quarter of the price of doing hard drives, even if it is faster. I mean, it would last way longer because you have these hard drives sitting in, storage, and you're writing over them like once every, year or whatever. So they would last a very, very long time, whereas tapes eventually get to the point where you write over them so many times that they don't write reliably, and they become useless. You have to toss them out. They become shredded.
Of course, it can be studied out way pretty bad. Even though it's studied out,
Yeah, well, now though. Yeah.
I don't know, I think the only people one place that I know that's using
They only use tape to back up, to put backups off site. They back up locally to a disk, so it's fast. And then after it backs up to disk, that same backup copies over to tape. and then those tapes get brought off site. So in case the building burns down or something, we still have that backup of all the data. So that's the mindset behind it. Okay, let's see, I kind of went over that. I don't really need to know that. Relevant. Okay, yeah, you'll be in here a lot. So sometimes startup repair works. So sometimes. Realistically, you'll need to know a lot of command line programs that will do what startup repair tries to do, but it'll actually work because you know how to do it better than Windows itself. As weird as that sounds. So there's one program called BCD edit. So that's one. BCD is part of the boot process of Windows. Check disk is another one, looking for errors on the hard drive. And then you also want to know disk part so that you can format hard drives from command line. And that one's extremely easy to use. It's way easier than Linux. Oh, when you're installing. That's what I mean.
Good.
Alright. Let's power on. So troubleshooting Windows. Failure to boot, it's generally BCD, like 95% of the time. So it's usually good to check that first. So when you boot into the installed disk and you run the BCD edit command, you have to run it with arguments because it won't automatically fix it. You have to tell it where to run, and that'll fix most issues with booting. Unable to load the GUI. Again, that's just system files. You have to run a repair. Startup repair will sometimes fix that. Otherwise, you can try to boot into safe mode. I think the next slide's actually doing this. Yeah. Invalid boot.ini, so that's kind of pointing where Windows is. No boot device, so physically not having a hard drive in, or having a hard drive where the OS isn't recognized even though it's there. So you have to repair that. So this is just the process of how you go about doing that. So you try to repair, and then if that doesn't work, you try to restore. Hopefully you thought of making a backup earlier, and then if all else fails, you just wipe it and start over, because you really have no choice past that. Yeah, just kind of go right to here, because that's really the best way. Just go straight to boot to Windows CD and quick repair. That's really the easiest way. Those are just some common commands. Look at those later. I'm not going to go through them. Let's see. Fix boot is another one. That's really nice. Fix boot, fix MBR. And I really want to check disk. So the most common cause of blue screen of death is driver issues, and you can fix that just by updating with the most recent drivers. It's also possible that the most recent drivers are what's causing the blue screen of death, so you can try to roll back or download an older driver. They generally include at least 3 versions of the driver. And then you just restore the registry with advanced startup options, last known good configuration, if you have a registry file failure. So hit F8 as it's trying to boot into Windows, and you reach a menu where it shows you these options, and the default option is start Windows normally. And generally what you want to do is either safe mode with networking or safe mode with command prompt. Minimally, I would say with command prompt. If you can get it in with regular safe mode, if you can't get it in with command prompt or with networking, then back down to safe mode. If you can't get in with safe mode, then you're usually pretty tanked. However, you can always try last known good configuration, which has really never worked for me. But if you can get in with command prompt, then at least you can try to fix things on your own. So basic files are loaded with no network. You can get to device manager and restore points. Networking is just what it sounds like. You get network capability. And then safe mode with command prompt. It literally boots up and then the command prompt pops up. I've never done that. Enable VGA mode. It enables a standard Windows VGA driver. So basically, it takes whatever driver you had installed for video and instead uses a generic VGA driver just to make sure that your display driver isn't messed up. And once you're in the GUI, the first thing you should do is head over to Event Viewer, check out your logs, and once you use it a little more, you'll know which categories to go in. But if you're having boot issues, more than likely you'll be in System, and you'll see error, information, or warning. There's also, I think, debug. Anyway, obviously error and warning are the two you want to take a look at, and you can actually sort your logs to only show those. You can do it like, say, okay, I only want to see logs from today between this time or just today. And then application is any program that can run on a machine. Security will be a lot of login successes, login failures. So login failures will be attempts to log in but have failed. So I'll see a lot of those login failures with people that have like big mushy hands, is what I call it. They basically like commonly hit a key that's near the key that they're supposed to hit. Yeah. So it's near the key that they thought they hit. And then they're like, oh, my account's locked out. You know, my password must be wrong or something. We look in the logs. It's completely fine. Or like, how do we say this nicely? Because you can't tell someone, oh, well, you just have fat fingers and you can't log in because you're typing it wrong. And then they tell you, oh, but I tried it like 6 or 7 times, and they'll say that every single time, regardless of if you found something or not. They'll be like, I swear, I tried many times. And then you're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. You're going to tell me your password. I'm going to try to enter it in. And then I'm going to reset it, and you're going to change it to something else. And then, of course, it magically works. Or, you know, what happens more often than not is that I walk over there, and then it works when he types it in, and I'm over there. I'm like, oh, gee, coincidence. A lot of times what I've had happen as well is you walk over there to work on something. You get over there, and it's like they knew that it was going to work anyway, or it never wasn't working. So you come over there to fix it. And they're like, oh, I swear it wasn't working before. They're like, and then they'll do this. Oh, and hey, by the way, I have this other thing. Could you check that out? And then you're already there, so you're like committed. You're like, if it's a small company, you say, yeah, sure. If you're a big company, you say, submit a ticket. And then they're not very happy with you because they were hoping you could just address it right away. In reality, you're kind of happy that that's a valid response and you can get away with that. Because then, you just, please submit a ticket. Sorry, it's part of the process. Nothing I can do. We'll resolve it as quickly as we can. And it's not a complete lie. I mean, do try to get to it as soon as possible. But, we're not perfect. And we're not as motivated as people think we are. Like, we have 500 tickets coming in. We can't tell you this, but it's not at the top of our list. This guy can't even log in. You're having an issue with Internet Explorer. Sorry, bud. So, msconfig. So I kind of went over that. Automatically starts. You can also turn services off. So if you have like a Windows server and you're having problems wearing the GUI, DHCP keeps turning on, but you're trying to turn it off in the GUI, and even if you hit disable, it doesn't disable or something. I've never had that happen, but I don't know. I'm guessing it could happen at some point. You could go in here, manually disable it from starting. So a lot of times what I've had happen is, if you ever had those programs where they say, oh, I'll fix your PC and update all your drivers and install all Windows updates automatically for you. And then it looks like it scans it and it tells you, oh, you have 700 Windows updates that aren't installed. You're like, hold on 1 minute. I know there aren't really that many Windows updates that I need. I might not be the most computer savvy, but I'm not that much of an idiot.
They're out there.
Oh yeah, they are. This one I encountered, it would start up every single time Windows would start up. It would cover the entire screen, including the taskbar at the bottom, and the only way to get around it was to be fast enough to get past it before it started up, because it's not the first process to start up. So you have to open a program that will stay on top of it after it opens. So I see this thing, and the nice thing about this machine, and this is kind of weird, is that it was slow. And the reason that's nice is because when it's slow, you can hit all the key commands on your keyboard ahead of time, hit enter, and then you just wait, and it goes, zoop. And if it's really fast, you're like, ah, geez, and then it pops up, and you're like, well, now I have to try again. You reboot. Darn it. Oh, finally. So, went in here, found the service, disabled it, and then promptly found the executable, ran a virus scan on it, got rid of it. So, one example, being able to combat it. Still can't believe those programs are out there. They don't work. Most of them don't work. There's one called Secunia PSI, Personal Software Install Inspector. That one actually works. What it does is it reaches out it scans your PC first to run a baseline. And then what it does is it compares the version of your software that's installed with a database that they have on their server, and that database is kept up to date with the current version number of the software that the manufacturer is reporting. So Secunia will automatically update your software to the most recent version, actually keep it up to date for most software. For things that are really like specialty, like AutoCAD, SolidWorks, it won't do that. But like major mainstream stuff like, Firefox, Java, it used to be really great. I tried it a little while ago. It was kind of clunky, a little slower than it used to be. But it's still a really nice program if you want to kind of automate it a little bit. So some issues that can lead to Windows not working: corrupted DLL files. Never go to a site that says download this DLL now, because they're almost always embedded with a virus. Go on the Windows install disk, find the DLL, and just copy it over. Or you can use a program known as SFC, which does basically the same thing. So what you do is you boot up into your Windows install disk, you open up command prompt, and you type in SFC/scan now. Yep, so it's right here. Actually, I didn't see it. Really great program. It actually works. I guess this is what it looks like. I've never used it because I always did backups from third-party software, which always works way better anyway. So most software is pretty good about this now, but it used to be where software would be like, oh, you don't have .NET 3.5, I can't install, and then it closes. Newer stuff is like, oh, you don't have .NET 3.5, would you like me to download it for you? Oh, sure. Click, and then it does it all. So, I find that compatibility mode sometimes works, but most of the time, programs that run on XP will run on Vista or 7 anyway. You get some programs here and there that are kind of like, they sort of work or they don't work. I think there's enough programs that are out there to replace programs that had issues, or those programs are up to date now, where it's not as big a problem as it used to be. But the cycle kind of starts over every time a new OS is released, unfortunately, because you can only develop so fast. Okay. Yeah, we know about those. Serial ports, officially known as RS-232 standard, used for serial devices. It's much older. A lot of times used for interfacing between routers. Some manufacturing equipment still uses it. Which?
A lot of manufacturing stuff.
Yeah, between that and some of it goes over Ethernet, which is kind of odd. Let's see. Yeah, serial. So, in case you still use a modem, these are some of the settings. Sometimes companies will have a dial-up connection that's there for use in case the Ethernet goes down for remote management, to see what's going on. So it's just fast enough to do an SSH connection and check out what's going on. But at no means is it, intended so that they can go over the web GUI of their routers or whatever. It's just go into the, SSH real quick, check it out. Maybe you just reboot the device through SSH just to see if that fixes it. It probably will. Who knows? You probably have a dedicated line coming in for the dial-up. Obviously, it would defeat the purpose if it was the same line. So USB kind of functions like this diagram shows. I'm not going to really bother explaining it because I don't think I can explain it better than it's written. But that's the idea behind it. So the host controller is on the motherboard itself. The hub is actually built into a chip on the motherboard that connects to those host controllers. So they're usually made in pairs. So you see 2 ports, 2 ports, 2 ports, 2 ports. Those are each a root hub. You won't really see USB 1 anymore, but maybe it's out there. I don't know. So this slide doesn't really cover USB 3, but that's becoming rather common and popular now. So USB 3, similar to USB 2, is backwards compatible to all of them. It's significantly faster. And most systems, well, actually, I'm going to go out of my way and say every system now supports USB 2. And it's becoming more common for every system to have USB 3 now. But I cannot say that it's every system. But I'm gonna say definitely every system now that you'll find, unless it's some ancient IBM or Novell in someone's basement is gonna have USB 2. You know. I would never plug this many devices into my PC. Who even has 127 devices to plug in? I mean, it would make it so slow. You know what? USB is slow to begin with. Maybe you have 127 mice plugged in. 127 webcams all around you. It would be a little creepy. I don't know. I mean, I've probably had 8 things plugged in at once, but you know, that was reasonable. I was like mouse, keyboard. The keyboard had a USB plug, so that was another one. Webcam, ports on the monitor, printer. You know, so right there, it's already 6, and those are pretty base level devices. So not that odd. So with any device, especially with USB, you want to install the driver before you actually plug in the device. However, with really common devices like mice, USB hubs, you can usually plug and play and it'll install it. Otherwise, worst case scenario, you plug it in, it installs the wrong driver, it doesn't work. You can unplug it, uninstall the driver, and then just download the right one and plug it back in and it'll work, in theory. Yeah, it shouldn't if you manually install it. Okay. So, by default, Windows will tell USB devices to sleep to save power, and if it goes into sleep, it won't show up in Device Manager. If the device is actively being used, so if you have a USB drive that's, maybe you're backing up to it or you're running virtual machine off of it, it's not going to go into sleep mode. But if it's sitting there, nothing's reading from it, nothing's writing from it, it'll go into sleep mode until you try to access it again. So it'll have a drive letter in my PC, but it's in sleep mode until you access it. And this is all you can configure is this checkbox. Don't worry about it. So i394 runs at 400 or 800 between the A or B standard. It's a 6-pin connector or 4-pin if it does not have power running through it. The i394B connector has 9 pins though. So this is kind of cool, but the reality is that FireWire isn't really that popular, even though it is kind of cool. So, unlike USB, which has a 5-meter limit, this is a 4.5-meter limit, and it can support up to 63 devices as opposed to USB. USB, which is 127. I don't know why you would network using FireWire now, but I guess you can if you have XP. Vinyl Prices are a really great site, especially for accessories, media cables. The numbers don't lie. I mean, this is an older PowerPoint that I updated a little bit, and I guess it was like 85 cents. I mean, it's crazy. Have you ever been to Mono Price? Price is cool as well. Their stores, you can think of Fry's like a super Walmart for electronics. Okay, it's only electronics, and maybe they have some appliances too. So it's kind of like a Best Buy, but supersize it into a Walmart.
It used to be a Fry's around here.
Oh, really? They have them in Arizona and various other locations scattered. They're not particularly economical as far as price goes, but they have like everything in store, which is awesome. Is it enough for
Needed with that copy of ceiling, but it's nice if you just go and fix something up and take it home.
Yeah, that's why I love Best Buy. It's not always the most expensive, but you have convenience. You have convenience.
Best Buy is carrying.
Yeah, well, they still have a lot of the mainstream stuff. They have, common things like hard drives and whatnot. Okay. Just try to search for it, maybe. It's probably unhappy because I'm live streaming. Anyway, we'll get it afterwards. It's just device manager. You just right click, uninstall. Another thing you can do before diagnosing that the port might be bad is plugging in a device that you know works, like a printer or maybe a regular wired mouse. So if you're using a wireless, it's not working, try a standard wireless mouse, the most basic one you can find. And then make sure that your port isn't turned off in CMOS. So, I mean, just basic stuff before you move on to the more complicated stuff, because it's so easy to jump to conclusions when in reality it can be something really simple. Wow, I feel bad for that USB port. And that was a really frustrating problem with those PS2 connectors. You bend the pin and you're like, oh man. And you try to bend it back and then you get so close, and then when you try to plug it in, it bends again. I've never broken a pin on those, but I've sat there for a good 10 minutes trying to get the pin right. One of the worst things is optical drives or hard drives. Ever bent the pin on a PETA drive?
No, yeah.
If you don't pull the cable out straight, you can sometimes bend the pins, or if you don't put it in exactly straight, you can bend the pins. I think I've done that once.
Some.
Really?
Was the
It came like that?
no from the customer. If they shipped it in for a different problem, and they got it in and they had it back to it was bent out on what we configured this video of an EGA and the our super utility because they used it for anything to PLCs serial. The damage back is underneath this. And then we sent it over. And what it did is it took the outer
Plate
metal
just
plates and pulled them all off and then jammed them into the plate.
Yeah, that's always smart. They haven't dabbed on it yet, but if you come across something that's really trivial that you're not sure if you can fix or you know you can't fix, just document it. Say, this is how I got it. This is how I tried to fix it. And, you know, sorry, I guess. You'll know what to say when you get there, because it's completely situational. So you just get, various input devices that you can use. Here you go, keywords, primary method of input. So that's another thing that's still around, is that you have USB options in the CMOS, where you can enable how fast you want the ports to run. So you can actually choose between high speed and fast. And then you can also change what it looks like when you're typing and how much delay there is between when you press the key and when it displays. So the repeat rate is like how close the character is behind your cursor as you're typing. So it could be really close, or it might drag behind a little bit. There's really no point of changing those. Usually if I'm doing this, you can either do that. I wouldn't bother with the water, it's kind of useless. Use alcohol on a cloth or paper towel, or you can use regular antibacterial wipes. That works fine too. Now use this. If you're going to bother cleaning it, do this first. Go outside with your keyboard, turn it upside down, and just hit it. Literally hit the keyboard, and you'll find everything you've ate within the last 6 months and more. Then take it back inside and clean it. Just they're strong enough to handle that abuse. Just get those, and then you'll get dust bunny in there too. Really nasty what gets in keyboards. Keys really aren't that hard to remove. They can break, but really, I broke one once, and it was like the space bar, and that was because the most common keys have metal bars to keep them in place because they're more reduced than other keys. The first thing I recommend before you even start thinking about taking the keys off, take out your camera on your phone, go click, because every keyboard has a different layout, and you'll thank yourself later because you'll have all these keys spread out, and then you'll have this empty keyboard, and you'll be like, oh boy, What have I gotten myself into? And then you'll be like, hey, that's right, I have this picture. And you can just click, 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 click. And you have it back together. Just like keyboards, there's options in mice. If you're left-handed, you can switch it so that left is right and right is left. Because it's like a George Orwell book here.
I'd rather trackball.
Yeah, speaking of cleaning things, trackballs were a big pain in the butt because they had rollers. There's usually 3 of them, and depending on which roller moved which way, that would be where your mouse moved on the screen. Over time, the ball would pick up dirt on your desk or wherever you used it, and it would get on the rollers, and then it would gum it up, and it wouldn't work as well. So you'd have to take out the little plate, take out the ball, and then you literally just take it. Even your finger, you can just take your fingernail, yeah, Q-tip alcohol. Even if you don't mind getting a little dirty, you can just take your fingernail and go on it. So they just get unreliable. So we're all happy that we have optical mice now. We have lasers. You can choose to go into cleaning the ball or just take a wet towel and just go around it and then pop it back in. I don't think I've ever cleaned the bottom of my mouse. There was never a need. I mean, the top plenty of times because I'll catch myself eating and using my computer at the same time. I won't touch my keyboard, but I will my mouse. And then it gets gross. Specialty input-outputs. So biometric devices, so fingerprint scanners, things like that, barcode readers, touchscreens, and KVM switches. So that's a Microsoft keyword. I can tell by the red ring around that fingerprint reader. So you just press your thumb down or any other finger, and they had software that came with it. You can't find the software online now, but it's out. You can find the discs. Retinal scanners. You've never seen those. I would totally dig having one of those though. That would be cool. I'm logged in, but I'm blind. Hey, it fixed my cataracts. Doctor, I swear, it was Windows. It saved me. Start a religion of Windows saving us all.
What it says, do not open those DVD drives.
This. I tell you, the doctors made these cases just so they would make money. They have really been able to save us this entire time. Alright, so biometric devices, the whole point is to avoid using passwords, but because biometric devices aren't the most reliable authentication methods in the world, you always end up setting a password anyway in case the biometric authentication does not work, which was common. You know, you would scan your fingerprint, you're like, I know I am who I am. No work. You're sitting there scanning your fingerprint. It's like, nope, don't recognize you. So you'd have passwords anyway. Just like for a little while, Android tablets had this face login. You would literally, it would take a picture of your face 3 times, and then it would say, okay, now go in different lighting that you would normally sit in, and we'll do it again. And it would remember your face. And in theory, you would just hold the tablet, and it had an outline of a face. It's just a dotted line of the shape of a head. you put your face in it, and theoretically it would recognize you and unlock. A lot of times it wouldn't work. It would be like, nope, don't see a face. you're like, moving it. Like, finally. Like, you finally get it logged in, you're like, I'm done with this. So, we said before, install the driver first, then the device. So, when you're using biometric, you install the software, then you plug the device in. So the software generally installs the driver, and then you scan your finger, or if you have a retinal scanner, you can do it that way as well. And then what you can even do is, if you have some software, will allow you to have one fingerprint for logging in, and then you can have macros for other fingerprints while you're logged in. So maybe you have one to open Chrome or whatever, which is kind of fun until you're like in the work environment and you're trying to do things quickly. So you're not like, yay, it opened! Barcode readers. You just read barcodes, and a lot of times they're used for inventory and point of sale systems. Now they're basically USB. I bet at some point they had barcode readers that were serial. I wouldn't have been too surprised, but it doesn't mention that, so you won't need to know that. Where is my mouse? There we go. Touchscreens, yeah, I don't need to explain that in today's age. KVMs, the ability to connect multiple PCs to the same monitor, keyboard, and mouse and speakers with some of them, and be able to switch between them with a push of a button. That's all it is. Hey, what do you know? We actually got close to the time that we're supposed to end. It is 8:26. Yeah, I did it. Finally got it. Week 6. First 5 weeks didn't get it, but now we're all good. Alright, so that is it. Do you have any questions?
Can you get to that monitor?
Yeah, let me try. I'll try again. Try again. Don't fail me. Oh, I know that's the site.
We're talking about, moving files to